The space around Kepler 442 looked like a battlefield from hell. Explosions lit up the darkness as alien ships fired at each other with deadly precision. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, watching the chaos unfold on the main screen. His ship had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, and what they found made his blood run cold. The Valdari were losing badly. Their peaceful colony ships were no match for the brutal Krex Empire fleet that had ambushed them. Jake could see at least 12 Valdari vessels already destroyed, their wreckage floating in space like broken dreams. The remaining 8 ships were trying to escape, but the Krex had them surrounded. "Captain, we're receiving distress signals from the Valdari fleet," said Amy Carter from her position at the communications station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the concern underneath. "They're asking for immediate assistance." Jake's jaw tightened. The Valdari had been humanity's first real friends among the stars. When humans had made their first clumsy attempts at space travel beyond their solar system, it was the Valdari who had welcomed them. They had shared their knowledge of faster-than-light travel, taught humans about galactic politics, and even helped establish trade routes. Now they were being slaughtered. "What's our status, Lisa?" Jake asked his second-in-command. "Commander." Lisa Hayes checked her tactical display. "The Krex have 23 warships, heavy cruisers and destroyers. They're using standard attack formations, focusing their fire on the Valdari engines to prevent escape." Ryan Brooks looked up from his tactical station. "Sir, the Valdari ships are civilian vessels. They have basic shields and maybe some light defensive weapons, but nothing that can stand up to a Krex war fleet." Jake watched as another Valdari ship exploded in a ball of fire. Women, children, and families were dying out there. The Valdari had been trying to establish a new colony in this system, away from the conflicts that plagued their homeworld. Instead, they had walked into a trap. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "Earth Command's orders were clear. We're supposed to avoid getting involved in galactic conflicts. This is our first deep space mission, and they want us to observe and learn." Jake knew she was right. The USS Defender was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, but it was also their first real attempt at building something that could compete with the established galactic powers. Earth Command had sent them out here to test their systems and gather intelligence, not to start a war. But watching innocent people die wasn't something Jake could stomach. "Tom, what's our weapons status?" he asked his chief engineer. Tom Bradley's voice came through the intercom from engineering. "All systems are green, Captain. The new weapons are fully charged and ready. We've got enough power to run everything at maximum capacity for hours." Karen Bell, the science officer, was studying the sensor readings. "Captain, I'm detecting massive casualties on the Valdari ships. Their life support systems are failing on at least 3 vessels." Jake made his decision. "Amy, open a channel to the Krex fleet." "Sir, are you sure about this?" Lisa asked. "We don't know how they'll react to human involvement." "The Valdari helped us when we had nothing to offer in return," Jake said firmly. "I won't stand by and watch them get massacred." Amy worked at her console. "Channel open, sir." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Defender. Krex fleet, you will cease your attack on the Valdari ships immediately and withdraw from this system." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew that this moment would change everything. For years, humanity had been careful to stay out of galactic conflicts. They were seen as a young, weak species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Now, they were challenging one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. Steve Clark, the navigation officer, spoke quietly. "Captain, The Krex fleet is changing formation. They're turning some ships toward us. On the main screen, they could see the massive Krex warships beginning to pivot. Each one was easily twice the size of the USS Defender, with thick armor plating, and weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. "No response to our transmission," Amy reported. Jake wasn't surprised. The Krex Empire was known for their arrogance and brutality. They probably saw the lone human ship as either a joke or an easy target. "Paul, bring all defensive systems online," Jake ordered. "Rachel, I want security teams at all battle stations." Chief, Engineer Paul Adams and Security Chief Rachel Stone acknowledged the orders. Around the bridge, the crew moved with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment, even though they had hoped it would never come. Dr. Helen Parker's voice came through the intercom from sickbay. "Medical is ready, Captain. We have emergency teams standing by." Jake nodded, even though she couldn't see him. His crew was ready. The question was whether their ship was ready for what was coming. The USS Defender was unlike any warship the galaxy had ever seen. While other species built their ships for brute force or speed, humans had focused on technology that seemed impossible. The ship's systems operated on principles that would confuse most galactic engineers. "Sir," Ryan said, studying his tactical display, "the Krex are still firing on the Valdari. They're ignoring us completely." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The Krex weren't just dismissing his warning, they were showing complete contempt for human authority. Another Valdari ship exploded as he watched. "Danny, target the lead Krex vessel," Jake ordered his weapons officer. "Prepare for engagement." Danny. Rodriguez's hands moved over his controls. "Weapons locked and ready, sir." Lisa stepped closer to Jake. "Captain, once we fire, there's no going back. Earth Command will have to deal with the consequences." Jake looked at the screen one more time. The Valdari ships were dying. Families were being torn apart by Krex weapons. His friends and allies were being murdered while he stood by and watched. "I know," he said quietly, "but some things are more important than politics." He took a deep breath and gave the order that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. "Fire." Admiral Zeth Ka of the Krex Empire stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the slaughter with satisfaction. The Valdari colony fleet was almost completely destroyed. Soon this system would belong to the Krex, and they could begin mining the rich mineral deposits they had discovered here. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we have detected a new vessel entering the system. It appears to be human." Zeth Ka's 4 eyes turned toward the display screen. A single ship, hung in space at the edge of the system, much smaller than his own massive warships. He had heard of humans, of course. They were a young species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Most galactic powers considered them barely worth noticing. "Ignore it," Zeth Ka commanded. "Continue the attack on the Valdari vessels." But Captain Mor Thul, one of his most experienced commanders, looked troubled. "Admiral, perhaps we should be cautious. I have read intelligence reports about human capabilities." Zeth Ka's mandibles clicked in annoyance. What could a single primitive ship possibly do against the might of the Krex Empire? We have conquered 47 worlds with fleets like this one. Mor Thul hesitated. The intelligence reports he had seen were strange and confusing. Humans had somehow survived multiple extinction events on their homeworld, including asteroid impacts and ice ages that should have wiped them out. They had developed nuclear weapons and space travel in an impossibly short time. Most disturbing of all, they had built starships using technology that seemed to violate several known laws of physics. "Sir, the human ship is transmitting," the communications officer announced. "Put it through," Zethka ordered, curious to hear what the primitive aliens had to say. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and clear. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Defender, Krex Fleet. You will cease your attack on the Valdari ships immediately and withdraw from this system." Zethka burst into laughter, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. His crew joined in, amused by the audacity of the human demand. A single small ship was ordering an entire Krex battle fleet to retreat. "Should we respond, Admiral?" the deck communications officer asked. "No," Zethka said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "Let them watch as we finish destroying their friends. Perhaps it will teach them their place in the galaxy." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Valdari flagship, Captain Vel Nara was fighting desperately to save her people. Her ship had taken heavy damage and life support was failing on several decks. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to keep their remaining ships functional. "Captain, we have lost the transport ship Harmony," her tactical officer reported with grief in his voice. "All hands." Vel Nara closed her eyes for a moment. The Harmony had been carrying over 3,000 colonists, including many children. They had all died when Krex torpedoes overwhelmed the ship's weak shields. "Captain," her communications officer said suddenly, "we are receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Vel Nara's hope flickered. The humans had helped the Valdari before, sharing technology and establishing trade agreements. But could a single human ship stand against an entire Krex fleet? "Put it through," she ordered. The same calm voice that had addressed the Krex now spoke to her. "Valdari Fleet, this is Captain Morrison. We are here to assist you. Please transmit your casualty reports and the locations of any ships with failing life support." "Captain Morrison," Vel Nara responded quickly. "We have lost 9 ships and are losing more every minute. 3 of our remaining vessels have critical life support failures. We have women and children aboard who need immediate evacuation." "Understood," Morrison replied. "Hold your position. Help is coming." But Vel Nara could see the tactical display. The human ship was alone, facing 23 Krex warships. Even if the humans had advanced technology, the odds were impossible. Back. On the USS Defender, the crew was preparing for battle with grim determination. They all knew they were outnumbered, but they also knew their ship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Captain," Amy Carter reported, "I'm monitoring Krex communications. They're laughing at us. Admiral Zethka is calling us primitive, insects, and promising to destroy us after they finish with the Valdari." Jake felt his anger growing colder and more focused. The Krex weren't just ignoring his warning, they were treating human life as worthless. "Karen, what do our sensors tell us about their fleet composition?" he asked. Karen Bell studied her readings carefully. 23 ships total, 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 3 dreadnoughts. Standard Krex design, thick armor, powerful energy weapons, and conventional shield systems. Conventional, Ryan Brooks repeated with a slight smile. That's the key word. The Krex used shield technology that was thousands of years old, based on simple energy absorption and deflection. It worked well against most galactic weapons, but human engineers had developed something entirely different. "Tom, how are our exotic systems performing?" Jake asked. Tom Bradley's voice came back strong and confident. "All systems are running perfectly, Captain. The quantum field generators are stable, and our antimatter reserves are at maximum capacity." Danny Rodriguez checked his weapons display. "Sir, all weapon systems are charged and ready. The kinetic accelerators are showing green across the board." Jake nodded. The USS Defender carried weapons that operated on principles most galactic species didn't understand. Instead of simple energy beams or projectile weapons, human technology used exotic physics that could manipulate matter and energy in ways that seemed almost magical. "Steve, bring us closer to the Krex fleet," Jake ordered. "I want them to get a good look at us." As the USS Defender moved through space toward the battle, both fleets began to take notice. The Krex were amused by what they saw as suicidal bravery. The Valdari watched with desperate hope, praying that their human friends had some miracle up their sleeves. Admiral Zethka finally decided to pay attention to the approaching human ship. "Tactical analysis," he commanded. His weapons officer studied the readings. "Admiral, the human vessel is approximately 800 meters long. Our sensors detect standard energy signatures for propulsion and life support, but there are some unusual readings we cannot identify. Probably primitive technology we don't recognize," Zethka said dismissively. "How long until we finish off the last Valdari ships?" "Approximately 10 minutes, sir." Zethka nodded. "Good. After we destroy them, we'll deal with the humans. It will be amusing to show them what happens to insects who challenge the Krex Empire." But Captain Thule was studying the sensor readings more carefully. The unusual energy signatures from the human ship were unlike anything in the galactic databases. There were patterns there that suggested technology far more advanced than anything humans should possess. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I recommend caution. Something about that. Ship doesn't match our intelligence on human capabilities." Zethka turned all four eyes on his subordinate. "Are you afraid of a single primitive vessel, Thule?" The veteran captain hesitated. He had survived dozens of battles by trusting his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming warnings at him. "No, sir," he finally said. "But perhaps we should at least respond to their transmission. Find out what they want." Zethka considered this. "Very well. Open a channel." As the communication link activated, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Neither the Krex nor the Valdari fully understood what they were about to witness. The communication channel crackled to life, and Admiral Zethka's harsh voice filled the bridge of the USS Defender. "Human insects, you dare to interfere with Krex Empire operations? You will watch as we destroy your pathetic friends, and then you will die for your insolence." Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried a weight that seemed to make the very air grow heavy. "Admiral Zethka, I am giving you one final opportunity to withdraw. Your forces from this system, the Valdari, are under human protection." Zethka's laughter echoed through the channel. "Human protection? You are one small ship against the might of the Krex Empire. We have destroyed civilizations that had fleets 1,000 times larger than yours." "I understand," Jake replied, his tone remaining perfectly calm. "You have built your reputation on attacking those weaker than yourselves. But today, that ends." The subtle insult hit its mark. Zethka's mandibles clicked angrily, and his voice became a snarl. "You will regret those words, human. After we finish with the Valdari, I will personally oversee your ship's destruction. Your crew will die slowly." Jake's expression didn't change. "Tom, are all systems ready?" From engineering, Tom Bradley's voice came back steady and confident. "All exotic systems are online and stable, Captain. We're operating at optimal efficiency." Karen Bell looked up from her science station. "Sir, I've completed my analysis of the Krex fleet. Their shield harmonics are exactly what we expected. Standard galactic technology, probably unchanged for centuries." Jake nodded. The Krex Empire was powerful because of their numbers and their willingness to use brutal force, but their technology had stagnated. They used the same weapons and defenses that had served them for thousands of years, never bothering to innovate because raw power had always been enough. Humans had taken a different approach. "Danny, prepare the demonstration shot," Jake ordered. Danny Rodriguez's hands moved across his weapons console with practiced precision. "Kinetic accelerator charging, sir. Targeting computer is locked on coordinates." Ryan Brooks studied his tactical display. "Sir, the Krex fleet is maintaining their attack formation. They're still firing on the Valdari ships." As if to emphasize his point, another explosion lit up the darkness as a Valdari transport took a direct hit. Emergency pods began launching from the dying ship, carrying survivors into the cold vacuum of space. Jake's jaw tightened. "They've made their choice. Fire when ready, Danny." The USS Defender's main weapon was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While most starships used energy beams or explosive projectiles, humans had developed something far more elegant and terrifying. The kinetic accelerator used controlled gravity fields to accelerate a small piece of dense matter to a significant fraction of light speed. "Firing now," Danny announced. There was no visible beam, no explosion, no dramatic display of power. The projectile was too small and moving too fast for conventional sensors to track. It simply appeared to materialize in the middle of the Krex formation, moving in a perfectly straight line through their fleet. The effect was immediate and stunning. As the projectile passed between the Krex ships, its immense gravitational field disrupted their shield generators. The carefully tuned energy fields that protected their hulls flickered and failed. Several smaller vessels lost power entirely as their main reactors were overwhelmed by the gravitational disturbance. Most importantly, the projectile's path had been calculated with surgical precision. It passed within meters of Admiral Zeth Ka's flagship, close enough that the bridge crew could feel the artificial gravity fluctuate as the massive gravitational wave swept past them. Then it was gone, leaving the Krex fleet floating in shocked silence. "What was that?" Zeth Ka roared, his voice cracking with sudden fear. His science officer was frantically checking his instruments. "Admiral, our shields are at 40% power. The gravitational disturbance overloaded our field generators. 3 destroyers have lost main power, and the cruiser Deathmore is reporting catastrophic systems failures." Captain Morthul felt ice forming in his veins. "Admiral, that projectile missed us by less than 50 meters. If it had been aimed directly at us..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge understood the implication. The human weapon could have destroyed the flagship with ease, but instead it had been used as a warning shot. On the USS Defender, Steve Clark calmly reported the results. "Shot placed exactly on target, Captain. Kinetic energy discharge was measured at 12% of maximum yield." 12%. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If that devastating display of power had been just a tiny fraction of the weapon's true capability, what could it do at full power? Amy Carter was monitoring communications across both fleets. "Sir, I'm picking up panicked transmissions from the Krex ships. Their crews are demanding to know what kind of weapon we used." Karen Bell looked up from her sensors. "Captain, the Krex shield generators are operating on standard harmonic frequencies. Our gravitational manipulation technology creates resonance, patterns that their systems can't compensate for." Jake nodded. It was exactly what human scientists had predicted. The galaxy's major powers had spent millennia perfecting their weapons and defenses, but they had all followed the same basic principles. Humanity had started from scratch, approaching the problems of space warfare with fresh perspectives and revolutionary technology. "Open the channel again, Amy," Jake ordered. When the communication link reactivated, Admiral ZFY's voice had lost its earlier confidence. What kind of weapon was that?" "A gentle reminder," Jake replied, his tone still maddeningly calm. "Admiral, you have 1 minute to order your fleet to cease fire and begin withdrawal from this system. If you choose not to comply, I will demonstrate what our weapons can do when we're not trying to avoid casualties." The bridge of ZFY's flagship erupted in urgent conversations. His officers were studying damage reports and sensor readings, trying to understand how a single projectile had crippled multiple ships without actually hitting anything. Captain Morthul stepped forward. "Admiral, I strongly recommend we consider the human demands. This is not like anything we've encountered before, coward," ZFY snarled. "The Krex Empire does not bow to threats from primitive species." But even as he spoke, ZFY was looking at the tactical display. 3 of his ships were dead in space, their crews working frantically to restore power. The human vessel hadn't even targeted them directly. Their weapon had simply passed nearby, and the gravitational effects had been enough to disable them. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving urgent messages from the disabled ships. Their engineers report that the gravitational waves somehow caused harmonic resonance in their shield generators. The feedback destroyed multiple systems." ZFY felt a chill of understanding. The humans hadn't just built a powerful weapon. They had built one specifically designed to counter galactic shield technology. It was as if they had studied every defense system in known space and created the perfect counter. On the Valdari flagship, Captain Velnara watched in amazement as the Krex fleet's formation began to waver. Ships that had been pressing their attack moments before were now falling back, their commanders clearly shaken by the human demonstration. "What did they do?" her tactical officer whispered. Velnara had no answer. She had seen the energy readings from the human weapon, and they defied everything she knew about physics. The projectile had somehow created a controlled gravitational field strong enough to disrupt starship systems across multiple vessels. The minute Jake had given Admiral ZFY was almost up. Across both fleets, crews waited to see what would happen next. The Krex had built their empire on the principle that overwhelming force could solve any problem. The Valdari had survived through diplomacy and cooperation. Now humanity was about to show the galaxy that there was a third option, technological superiority so complete that force became irrelevant. Jake checked the chronometer on his command chair. 30 seconds, Admiral. I suggest you decide quickly." The 30 seconds felt like hours. Admiral ZFY stared at the human ship on his display screen, his mind racing through possibilities. Everything he knew about warfare told him that retreat was impossible. The Krex Empire had never backed down from a fight, especially not against a single enemy vessel, but the disabled ships floating dead in space told a different story. 3 of his destroyers were still working frantically to restore power, their crews reporting damage that should have been impossible from a weapon that hadn't even hit them directly. "Time's up, Admiral," came Captain Morrison's voice through the communication channel. ZFY's pride overruled his caution. "The Krex Empire yields to no one. All ships, engage the human vessel. Destroy them." The order went out across the Krex fleet, and 20 functional warships turned their weapons toward the USS Defender. For a moment, space around the human ship lit up like a deadly fireworks display as energy beams and torpedoes converged on their target. But something impossible happened. The weapon's fire simply stopped. Energy beams that should have torn through the human ship's hull were absorbed by shields that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Torpedoes that should have exploded against their target instead slowed to a stop and hung motionless in space. On the USS Defender's bridge, Paul Adams's voice came through the intercom with barely contained excitement. "Captain, the defensive grid is performing exactly as designed. We're not just absorbing their energy. We're storing it." Jake nodded with satisfaction. While the galaxy's species had focused on building bigger guns and thicker armor, human engineers had asked a simple question. What if you could turn your enemy's weapons against them? The USS Defender's shield system didn't work like conventional defenses. Instead of simply blocking incoming attacks, it captured and redirected the energy, feeding it into the ship's own power systems. Every shot the Krex fired was making the human vessel stronger. "Danny, show them what we can do with their own weapons," Jake ordered. Danny Rodriguez smiled as he worked his controls. "With pleasure, sir." The USS Defender began to glow. Energy patterns danced across its hull as the absorbed power was channeled into the ship's exotic weapon systems. Then, with surgical precision, the human ship began to return fire. But this wasn't the crude energy beams and explosive torpedoes the Krex were used to. The human weapons seemed to operate on principles that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. Gravity manipulation devices reached out across space and began to crush Krex hulls like tin cans. The thick armor plating that had protected them against conventional weapons proved useless against forces that attacked the very structure of matter itself. Directed energy beams phased through Krex shields as if they didn't exist, striking critical systems with pinpoint accuracy. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before found their engines disabled, their weapons offline, their life support systems failing. Most terrifying of all were the drone swarms. Thousands of small craft poured out of the USS Defender's launch bays, moving with perfect coordination. They operated like a single mind, anticipating the Krex ship's movements and striking at vulnerable points with mechanical precision. Admiral Zeth Ka watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. "How is this possible?" he screamed at his science officer. The officer was frantically studying sensor readings that made no sense. "Admiral, their technology operates on principles we don't understand. Our shields can't stop their weapons because they're not using conventional energy patterns." Captain Morthul was coordinating damage control, but it was a losing battle. "Admiral, we've lost 8 ships in the last 3 minutes. The humans are targeting our engines and weapon systems. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us. That realization sent a chill through Zeth Ka. The humans weren't just winning, they were doing it with restraint. They could have obliterated his entire fleet in the opening moments of the battle, but instead they were carefully neutralizing each ship while preserving the lives of the crews. It was a demonstration of power so complete that it bordered on casual cruelty. On the bridge of the USS Defender, the crew worked with calm efficiency. There was no shouting, no panic, no desperate orders. They were simply following procedures they had trained for countless times. "Status report," Jake requested. Ryan Brooks checked his tactical display. 16 Krex ships disabled, sir. 7 more have suffered significant damage but remain operational. No casualties reported on either side. Steve Clark monitored the navigation systems. All disabled vessels are maintaining life support and emergency power. Their crews appear to be unharmed. Karen Bell looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the remaining Krex ships. They're attempting to overload their reactors." Jake's expression darkened. "They're going to try a suicide run. Amy, open a channel to Admiral Zeth Ka." When the communication link activated, Zeth Ka's voice was filled with desperate rage. "If we cannot have victory, we will have revenge. My remaining ships will overload their reactors and take you with us to death." "Admiral," Jake said calmly, "that would be a mistake." "Why? Your shields cannot stop a reactor explosion at close range." "You're right," Jake agreed. "But you're assuming we would let you get close." Before Zeth Ka could respond, the USS Defender demonstrated another impossible capability. The remaining Krex ships suddenly found themselves unable to move. Their engines fired, their thrusters burned, but they remained perfectly motionless. "In space!" "What have you done to us?" Zeth Ka demanded. Danny Rodriguez answered for his captain. "Localized gravitational fields, Admiral. We're holding your ships in place. Your reactors can overload all they want. You're not going anywhere." The demonstration was so complete, so overwhelming, that it left the entire galaxy stunned. A single human ship had not only defeated an entire Krex battle fleet, but had done so while showing perfect control over every aspect of the engagement. Tom Bradley's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, power levels are nominal. We could maintain this operation indefinitely." Jake nodded. The message was clear. Humanity possessed technology so advanced that conventional warfare had become obsolete. The age of building bigger ships and more powerful weapons was over. The future belonged to those who could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. "Admiral Zeth Ka," Jake said into the communication channel, "you now have two choices. You can order your remaining ships to stand down and prepare for evacuation, or you can watch as we disable them one by one. Either way, this ends here." The silence that followed stretched across the entire star system. Both fleets waited to see how the most powerful military force in the galaxy would respond to complete and utter defeat. Captain Velnara, watching from her damaged bridge, could barely believe what she was seeing. The humans had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare in a matter of minutes. Every military strategist in known space would have to start over from scratch. But more than that, humanity had shown something that was perhaps even more impressive than their technology: restraint. They could have destroyed every Krex ship and crew member in the opening seconds of the battle. Instead, they had chosen to disable and capture, preserving life even among their enemies. It was a display of power coupled with mercy that the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Zeth Ka finally found his voice. I surrender. All ships, stand down. Prepare for evacuation." The words echoed across the communication channels, marking the end of the battle and the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The 50 ships that dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system represented some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison studied the tactical display as his sensors identified the newcomers. 12 ships from the Centauri Federation, 15 from the Rigel Consortium, 8 from the Vegan Empire, and another 15 that belonged to smaller but influential species. "They're maintaining their distance," Ryan Brooks reported from his tactical station, "forming what looks like an observation formation about 10 million kilometers out." Amy Carter was monitoring the flood of communications traffic between the arriving ships. "Sir, they're all talking to each other, but no one's tried to contact us yet. I think they're trying to figure out what happened here." Jake wasn't surprised. The sight of 23 disabled Krex warships floating around a single human vessel would be enough to shake anyone's understanding of galactic military power. Karen, what are our sensors telling us about their capabilities? He asked. Karen. Bell studied her readings carefully. Standard galactic technology across the board, sir. Advanced, but nothing we haven't seen before. Their weapons and shields operate on the same basic principles as the Krex fleet, which means they're all equally vulnerable to our systems, Danny Rodriguez added quietly. Jake nodded. It was exactly what human intelligence had predicted. The galaxy's major powers had all developed along similar technological paths, building bigger and more powerful versions of the same basic designs. Humanity had taken a completely different approach. Sir, Amy announced, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Centauri ship. It's Admiral Marcus Chen of the Federation Navy. Put him through, Jake ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a distinguished older man in an elaborate military uniform. Admiral Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but Jake could see the wariness in his eyes. Captain Morrison, Chen began, I am Admiral Chen of the Centauri Federation. We received distress signals from this system and came to investigate. It appears we missed the excitement. Admiral, Jake replied with equal formality. The situation here has been resolved. The Valdari colonists are safe, and the Krex forces have been neutralized. Chen's eyes flicked to the tactical display showing the disabled Krex ships. So I see. Quite impressive for a single vessel. Tell me, Captain, exactly what kind of ship are you commanding? It was the question Jake had been expecting. The USS Defender is a human deep space exploration vessel, Admiral. We happened to be in the area when the Krex attacked the Valdari colony fleet. Exploration vessel, Chen repeated, clearly not believing a word of it. And this exploration vessel was able to defeat an entire Krex battle fleet? The Krex were targeting civilians, Jake said simply. We couldn't allow that to continue. Before Chen could respond, another voice cut into the communication channel. This is Fleet Commander Vex Thule of the Rigel Consortium. Human vessel, you will explain how you achieved victory against superior numbers. More voices joined the conversation as commanders from the other fleets demanded answers. The communication channel became a chaos of different languages and translation protocols as everyone spoke at once. Jake raised his hand, and somehow the gesture cut through the noise. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made all the other commanders fall silent. Gentlemen and ladies, I understand your curiosity about recent events. However, my primary concern at the moment is completing rescue operations for the Valdari survivors. If you wish to discuss the tactical details of the engagement, you're welcome to do so after we've finished saving lives. The rebuke was gentle, but effective. It reminded everyone that there were still people in danger while they argued about military technology. Admiral Chen cleared his throat. Of course, Captain. Perhaps we could assist with the rescue operations? That's very kind, Jake replied, but we have the situation well in hand. Our teams are already working with the Valdari crews to restore their ship's systems. It was another demonstration of human capabilities. Most galactic powers would have needed hours to organize a rescue operation of this scale, but the USS Defender had deployed teams within minutes of the battle's end. Tom Bradley's voice came through the intercom. Captain, I'm getting some interesting readings from the observing fleet. Their sensors are running full active scans on us. Jake wasn't surprised. Every ship out there was trying to figure out how human technology worked. They would be disappointed. The USS Defender's hull was designed to deflect most conventional sensor probes. Let them look, he said. They won't learn anything useful. Dr. Helen Parker contacted the bridge from sickbay. Captain, we've completed treatment of the most seriously injured Valdari. Their medical technology is advanced, but our nanomedical systems were able to handle cases their doctors couldn't treat. Another subtle demonstration. Human medical technology was apparently as advanced as their weapons systems. Fleet Commander Vex Thule tried again. Human Captain, the Rigel Consortium demands to know the specifications of your vessel's armament. Such weapons could upset the balance of power in this sector. I'm afraid that information is classified, Jake replied calmly. Classified? Admiral Chen interjected. Captain, surely you understand that the appearance of revolutionary military technology affects all of us. The Galactic Council will need to be informed. Jake had been waiting for this moment. Admiral, humanity is not a member of the Galactic Council. We have no obligation to share our technological developments with anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. The Galactic Council was the closest thing to a unified government that existed in known space. Almost every spacefaring species belonged to it, and its military arm, the Combined Fleet, was considered the ultimate authority on interstellar conflicts. Not a member, came a new voice from one of the Vegan ships. How is that possible? All advanced species join the Council. Humanity prefers to maintain its independence, Jake explained. We have trade relationships and diplomatic ties with many Council species, but we've never sought membership. What he didn't mention was that the Galactic Council had never offered membership to humanity. Like most established powers, they had dismissed humans as a primitive species that would never amount to anything significant. Now that assessment looked embarrassingly short-sighted. Steve Clark reported quietly from his navigation station. Captain, 3 more fleets just dropped out of hyperspace. Word is definitely spreading. The new arrivals included ships from the Tau Ceti Republic, the Alpha Centauri Mining Consortium, and what looked like a diplomatic vessel from the Galactic Council itself. Sir, Amy said, I'm receiving a priority transmission from the Council ship. It's Ambassador Relthas. He's requesting immediate communication. Jake sighed. Ambassador Relthas was one of the most powerful diplomats in the galaxy, known for his ability to resolve conflicts between member species. His presence here meant that the Council was taking this situation very seriously. Put him through, Jake ordered. The screen split to show multiple faces as Ambassador Relthas joined the communication channel. The Rigelian diplomat was elderly even by his species' standards, with the kind of presence that came from centuries of high-level negotiations. Captain Morrison, Relthas began. I am Ambassador Relthas of the Galactic Council. I have been monitoring the situation here, and I must say that the Council is concerned about these recent developments. Concerned about what, Ambassador? Jake asked. About the implications of humanity possessing military technology that can defeat established galactic powers. Such capabilities could destabilize the entire region. Jake felt his patience beginning to wear thin. Ambassador, with respect, humanity has never threatened anyone. We responded to an attack on our allies. If that destabilizes anything, perhaps the problem lies with those who choose to attack innocent civilians. The rebuke hit home. Several of the military commanders shifted uncomfortably, knowing that their own governments had looked the other way when the Krex Empire had targeted weaker species. Rachel Stone's voice came through the intercom. Captain, all Valdari personnel have been safely evacuated from the damaged ships. Rescue operations are complete. Thank you, Rachel. Jake turned back to the multiple faces on his screen. Gentleman Ambassador, the immediate crisis has been resolved. The Valdari are safe, and the Krex threat has been neutralized. I suggest we all return to our respective territories and allow normal diplomatic channels to handle any remaining issues. But Ambassador Relthos wasn't finished. Captain, the Council must insist on a full briefing regarding human military capabilities. The balance of power in this sector has clearly shifted, and the Council needs to understand the implications. Jake's expression hardened. Ambassador, as I mentioned earlier, humanity is not subject to Council authority. We will share information through normal diplomatic channels if and when we choose to do so. The tension in the communication channel was thick enough to cut. For the first time in galactic history, someone was telling the Council that they didn't have the right to demand answers. It was a moment that would change everything. The aftermath of Admiral Zeth Ka's surrender left an eerie silence hanging over the Kepler 442 system. 23 of the galaxy's most feared warships floated dead or disabled in space, their crews struggling to understand what had just happened to them. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, watching as his crew began the complex task of managing the situation. They had won a victory that would echo across the galaxy, but now came the harder challenge of dealing with the consequences. Amy, establish communication with the Valdari fleet, Jake ordered. Let them know we're going to begin rescue operations. Amy. Carter worked at her console. Channel open, sir. Captain Velnara's voice came through with obvious relief and gratitude. Captain Morrison, the Valdari people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Your actions today have saved thousands of lives. Just doing what's right, Jake replied. What's your status? Do you need immediate assistance? 3 of our ships have critical life support failures. We have evacuated most of the crew, but we still have over 200 people trapped in damaged sections. Jake turned to his security chief. Rachel, prepare rescue teams. I want our best people over there with full emergency equipment. Rachel. Stone nodded. Already on it, sir. Teams Alpha through Delta are suiting up now. As the human rescue teams prepared to deploy, the crew of the USS Defender continued to monitor the disabled Krex vessels. It was a delicate situation. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority, but they were still vastly outnumbered by enemy personnel. Sir, Ryan Brooks reported from his tactical station, I'm detecting movement on the Krex flagship. It looks like they're launching escape pods. Jake studied the sensor readings. Admiral Zeth Ka appeared to be abandoning his ship, along with most of his senior officers. It was a smart move. Staying aboard a disabled vessel in enemy territory was a recipe for capture. Let them go, Jake decided. Track the pods, but don't interfere with their escape. Dr. Helen Parker's voice came through the intercom from sickbay. Captain, I'm receiving casualty reports from the Valdari ships. We're going to need to set up emergency medical facilities. Do whatever you need to do, Helen. Use the cargo bays if necessary. Tom Bradley's engineering teams were already analyzing the exotic energy signatures left behind by the battle. The human weapons had performed flawlessly, but Tom wanted to make sure there were no unexpected side effects. Captain, Tom reported, all systems are operating within normal parameters. The gravitational manipulation devices have returned to standby mode, and our power levels are back to baseline. Karen Bell was conducting a different kind of analysis, studying the wreckage and disabled ships to understand exactly how effective their weapons had been. Sir, preliminary assessment shows that we achieved complete tactical superiority without any permanent structural damage to the Krex vessels. Their crews should be able to restore basic functions within a few hours. It was exactly what Jake had hoped for. The goal had never been to destroy the Krex fleet. It had been to demonstrate that humanity could no longer be ignored or dismissed. "Steve, begin moving us toward the Valdari ships," Jake ordered. "I want to get our rescue teams over there as quickly as possible." As the USS Defender changed course, both fleets watched its movement with very different emotions. The Valdari saw salvation approaching, while the surviving Krex crew members felt the weight of their defeat settling over them. On the bridge of a disabled Krex destroyer, Captain Morthul was trying to make sense of the sensor data from the battle. His science officer had been analyzing the readings for 30 minutes, and the results were disturbing. "Captain, the human weapons appear to operate on at least 4 different exotic physics principles that we don't understand," the officer reported. "Their gravity manipulation technology alone represents advances that should take centuries to develop." Morthul nodded grimly. "And their defensive systems, even more advanced. They didn't just absorb our weapons fire, they converted it into usable energy for their own systems. Every shot we fired made them stronger. The implications were staggering. The Krex Empire had built its power on military superiority, but they had just encountered a species whose technology made their own weapons look like primitive clubs." "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "I'm monitoring transmissions from the other ships. The crews are scared. They've never seen anything like this." Morthul couldn't blame them. He had fought in dozens of battles, conquered multiple worlds, and faced enemies with superior numbers or better tactics. But he had never encountered an opponent whose technology was so advanced that the fight was over before it began. Meanwhile, on the Valdari flagship, Captain Velnara was coordinating with the incoming human rescue teams. The efficiency and professionalism of the human crews was impressive. They worked with the kind of precision that came from extensive training and advanced equipment. "Captain Morrison," she transmitted, "your teams are already making a difference. We've restored life support to Section 7, and your medical personnel are treating our wounded with equipment I've never seen before." Jake's voice came back, warm and reassuring. "That's what allies do for each other, Captain. How are your colonists holding up?" "Frightened, but alive thanks to you." "Captain, may I ask, how long has humanity possessed this level of technology?" "There was a pause before," Jake answered. "Let's just say we've been working on it for a while." It was a diplomatic non-answer, but Velnara understood the implications. Humanity had been developing these capabilities in secret, probably for years or even decades. The young species that the galaxy had seen as harmless newcomers had been quietly building weapons that could reshape the balance of power. Back on the USS Defender, Jake was receiving reports from teams throughout the ship. The rescue operations were proceeding smoothly, but he knew that the real challenges were just beginning. "Danny, what's the status of our weapons systems?" he asked. Danny Rodriguez checked his displays. "All systems green, sir. The kinetic accelerators are fully charged, and the exotic field generators are operating at optimal efficiency." "Good. Keep them ready. I have a feeling this isn't over yet." Amy looked up from her communication station. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Someone's coming." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "How many ships?" "At least 50, sir. The energy signatures don't match Krex designs. Karen Bell was already analyzing the sensor data." "Captain, based on the drive signatures, I believe we're looking at ships from multiple species. Word of this battle is spreading fast." Jake nodded. It was inevitable that news of the engagement would reach other galactic powers quickly. The destruction of a Krex battle fleet by a single unknown vessel was the kind of event that would send shock waves throughout known space. "Sir," Ryan added, "I'm detecting at least 3 different military configurations in the approaching fleet. It looks like we're about to have company from some of the major galactic powers." Jake took a deep breath. The easy part was over. They had saved the Valdari and demonstrated human capabilities to the Krex. Now came the real test, dealing with the political consequences of what they had done. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We have multiple unknown vessels approaching our position. All departments are to maintain readiness condition Alpha. This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, the crew prepared for whatever was coming next. They had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy, and now they would have to deal with the response. The age of humanity hiding in the shadows was over. Now the real work would begin. The communication channel fell silent as Ambassador Relthos processed Captain Morrison's words. For centuries, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate authority in known space. No species had ever simply refused to cooperate with their investigations. "Captain Morrison," Relthas said carefully, "perhaps I was not clear. The Council is not making a request. When military technology of this magnitude appears, all civilized species have an obligation to share information for the greater good of galactic stability." Jake's expression didn't change. "Ambassador, I understand your position. However, humanity's position is equally clear. We will not be dictated to by organizations we don't belong to." Admiral Chen tried to defuse the situation. "Captain, surely, we can reach some kind of compromise. The Federation has always maintained friendly relations with humanity." "And we value that relationship," Jake replied. "But friendship doesn't mean giving away our technological secrets to anyone who asks for them." While the tense diplomatic exchange continued, Chris Murphy was busy in the USS Defender's Intelligence Center. As the ship's intelligence officer, he was monitoring communication traffic throughout the system, and what he was hearing made for fascinating listening. "Captain," Chris reported through the intercom, "you need to hear what's happening on the back channels." Jake muted his microphone. "What do you have, Chris?" "The various fleet commanders are having some very interesting private conversations. The Rigel Consortium is already talking about establishing a trade embargo against human colonies. The Vegan Empire is discussing military preparations, and the Tau Ceti Republic is sending urgent messages to their homeworld requesting reinforcements." Jake nodded grimly. It was exactly what human intelligence had predicted would happen. The established powers couldn't accept that a species they had dismissed as primitive now possessed superior technology. "Any good news?" Jake asked. "Actually, yes. The smaller species are reacting very differently. The Proxima Centauri Alliance is sending congratulations for stopping Krex aggression. The Barnard's Star Cooperative is requesting formal diplomatic contact. And at least 6 minor species are asking about possible defense treaties with humanity." It made sense. The smaller civilizations had suffered under the dominance of the major powers for centuries. The idea that someone could successfully challenge that dominance was appealing to them. Jake reactivated his microphone and returned to the diplomatic conversation. "Gentlemen, Ambassador, I think we've covered the immediate issues. Unless there are other pressing matters, I suggest we conclude this discussion." But Fleet Commander Vex Thule wasn't ready to let it go. "Human Captain, the Rigel Consortium will not tolerate threats to galactic stability. If humanity refuses to cooperate with established authorities, we may be forced to take protective measures." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Jake felt his crew tense around him as they recognized what was being suggested. "Commander," Jake replied with dangerous calm, "are you threatening military action against a vessel that just finished saving civilian lives?" "I am stating that the consortium will not allow dangerous technologies to spread unchecked," Vex Thule responded. Jake was about to reply when Karen Bell looked up from her science station with alarm. "Captain, I'm detecting energy buildups on, several of the consortium ships. It looks like they're charging weapons." The situation was escalating rapidly. Jake made a quick decision. "Amy, open a fleet-wide channel. I want everyone to hear this." When the communication link expanded to include all the ships in the system, Jake's voice carried across space to hundreds of vessels and thousands of crew members. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Defender. To any vessels considering hostile action, I want to make something perfectly clear. The weapon demonstration you witnessed earlier was conducted at 12% of our maximum capability. The gravitational manipulation technology that disabled the Krex fleet was one of several exotic systems we have available." He paused to let that sink in. "Furthermore, the USS Defender is not alone. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for years. We have assets throughout this sector that you are not aware of." It was a calculated bluff, but one that carried the weight of demonstrated capability behind it. Steve Clark looked up from his navigation station. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace disturbances. Something big is coming." The sensor displays throughout the system lit up as new contacts began appearing. But these weren't the random arrival patterns of ships responding to distress calls. These contacts were arriving in coordinated formations, dropping out of hyperspace in precise geometric patterns around the system. 12 ships, Ryan Brooks reported with barely concealed amazement. "No, wait, 18. They're still coming." Amy Carter was monitoring the new arrivals' communication protocols. "Sir, the new contacts are transmitting human identification codes, and their energy signatures, they match ours." 24 vessels materialized around the Kepler 442 system, each one broadcasting human transponder codes. They were sleek, predatory-looking ships that moved with the kind of precision that spoke of advanced automation and superior technology. Admiral Chen stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Captain Morrison, exactly how many ships does humanity have?" "Enough," Jake replied simply. The truth was even more remarkable than the assembled fleets realized. For the past 15 years, humanity had been quietly building a space fleet that operated entirely in the shadows. While other species had been focused on traditional expansion and colonization, humans had been establishing hidden bases, developing exotic technologies, and preparing for the day when they could no longer avoid galactic politics. Ambassador Reltas found his voice first. "Captain, the Council was not aware that humanity possessed such extensive military capabilities." "The Council never asked," Jake pointed out. "You assumed we were a minor species with limited technology. We didn't see any reason to correct that assumption." Tom Bradley's voice came through the intercom with obvious pride. "Captain, all human vessels are reporting full readiness. Fleet Admiral Sarah Mitchell sends her compliments and asks if you require assistance." Fleet Admiral Mitchell. Even Ambassador Relthas recognized that name. She was a legend in human space, the architect of humanity's rapid technological advancement, and the designer of their revolutionary military doctrine. "Please give the Admiral my thanks," Jake replied. "Tell her the situation is under control, but we appreciate the backup." Fleet Commander Vex Thule was staring at his own tactical display with growing alarm. This is impossible. Our intelligence services monitor all major military construction. How did you build such a fleet without anyone noticing? Danny Rodriguez answered for his captain. Commander, human space is very large, and you weren't looking in the right places. It was true. While the major galactic powers had been focused on the established trade routes and known star systems, humanity had been exploring and colonizing regions of space that others had dismissed as worthless. They had built their shipyards in systems, with no habitable planets, hidden their research facilities in asteroid belts, and developed their technology in complete secrecy. Captain Velnara, who had been quietly listening to the exchange, finally spoke up. If I may, Ambassador, Commander, Admiral, humanity has just demonstrated something that the galaxy has forgotten. They have shown that it's possible to defend innocent lives without seeking conquest or dominance. Her words carried special weight because the Valdari had just been saved by human intervention. The Krex Empire has been attacking civilian populations for decades, she continued. The major powers have always found excuses to avoid getting involved. Today, a single human ship risked everything to save people they barely knew. Perhaps the question isn't why humanity developed these capabilities in secret, but why the rest of us weren't paying attention to what was really happening in our galaxy. The rebuke stung because it was accurate. The Galactic Council and the major powers had grown comfortable with the status quo, even when that status quo included regular atrocities committed by aggressive species like the Krex. Ambassador Relthos cleared his throat. Captain Morrison, the Council would like to open formal diplomatic discussions with humanity. It appears we have underestimated your people's significance. We would welcome such discussions, Jake replied diplomatically. I'm sure our respective governments can work out the details through normal channels. But privately, Jake knew that everything had changed. The age of humanity operating in the shadows was over. From now on, they would be major players in galactic politics, whether they wanted to be or not. The question was what they would do with that new status. And, judging by the 24 human warships now visible to every sensor in the system, they were more than ready to find out. 3 hours after the arrival of the human fleet, the diplomatic situation in the Kepler 442 system had transformed completely. What had begun as a rescue mission had become the most significant shift in galactic politics in over 1,000 years. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, reading the priority message that had just arrived from Earth Command. The words on the screen confirmed what he had already suspected. There was no going back to the old ways. Captain, Amy Carter announced, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Sarah Mitchell aboard the UHS Titan. Jake nodded. Put her through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Admiral Mitchell had been the driving force behind humanity's secret military buildup, and her arrival meant that Earth Command was taking direct control of the situation. Captain Morrison, Admiral Mitchell began, congratulations on a well-executed operation. Your handling of both the Krex threat and the subsequent diplomatic challenges has been exemplary. Thank you, Admiral. What are our orders? Mitchell's expression grew serious. The situation has evolved beyond a simple rescue mission, Captain. Intelligence reports indicate that at least 12 major galactic powers are calling emergency sessions to discuss the human problem. It appears our period of quiet development has come to an end. Jake had expected as much. What's the response? From Earth Command. The President has authorized full disclosure protocols, Mitchell replied. We're no longer maintaining the pretense that humanity is a minor galactic power. As of 6 hours ago, human colonies throughout the galaxy have been instructed to reveal their true defensive capabilities. The implications were staggering. For years, human settlements had appeared to be vulnerable frontier outposts, protected by nothing more than basic shields and light weapons. In reality, many of them had been hiding military installations that could rival anything the major powers possessed. "Sir," Ryan Brooks reported quietly, "I'm detecting energy signatures from the direction of the Ross 128 system. Multiple contacts, human configuration." Admiral Mitchell smiled slightly. "That would be Battle Group 7. They're taking up positions to secure the local trade routes. Similar deployments are happening throughout human space." Tom Bradley's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, I'm receiving technical data packets from the Admiral's ship. It looks like... Wow, we're getting specifications for technologies I didn't even know existed." Mitchell nodded. "The USS Defender was our first-generation stealth combat vessel, Captain. Impressive as your capabilities are, they represent only a fraction of what we've developed." Jake felt a chill of understanding. "Admiral, exactly how long has humanity been preparing for this?" "Since first contact with the Valdari 37 years ago," Mitchell replied. "When we learned about the true nature of galactic politics, the constant warfare, the oppression of weaker species, the casual brutality of empires like the Krex, we decided that humanity would never be in that position." Karen Bell looked up from her science station. "Admiral, the energy readings from your fleet are extraordinary. Some of those ships are generating power levels that should be impossible." "Fusion-powered antimatter synthesis," Mitchell explained casually. "We've moved beyond conventional reactor technology. Most of our newer vessels can operate for decades without refueling." The casual way she mentioned technology that would revolutionize galactic civilization showed just how far ahead human science had advanced. Ambassador Rel Tas's voice came through the communication channel. "Admiral Mitchell, the Galactic Council requests an immediate meeting to discuss these new developments." Mitchell's expression grew cold. "Ambassador, the Council has had 37 years to notice what humanity was doing. The fact that you're only paying attention now says more about your intelligence services than it does about our secrecy. Admiral, surely you understand that these revelations change everything. The balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for millennia has been completely disrupted." "Good," Mitchell replied bluntly. "That balance of power was built on the suffering of weaker species. The Krex Empire alone has destroyed over 200 civilian colonies in the past century, and the Council has done nothing to stop them." Jake watched as the various fleet commanders listening to the conversation shifted uncomfortably. Mitchell was right, and everyone knew it. Dr. Helen Parker contacted the bridge from sickbay. "Captain Admiral, I thought you should know that the Valdari casualties we've been treating have been sharing their medical data with our teams. Their physicians are amazed by our nanomedical technology. They're saying we've advanced their understanding of cellular repair by decades. Another demonstration of human technological superiority, this time in a field dedicated to saving lives rather than taking them." Fleet Commander Vex Thule tried once more to assert authority. "Admiral Mitchell, the Rigel Consortium demands to know the full extent of human military capabilities. Our security requires—" "Commander," Mitchell interrupted, "your security is not our responsibility. If the Consortium is concerned about threats to stability, perhaps you should examine your own policies toward weaker species." Chris Murphy's voice came through the intercom. "Admiral Captain, you need to hear this. I'm monitoring communications from over 40 different species. The smaller civilizations are celebrating our emergence as a major power. The Proxima Alliance has already declared humanity to be their protector of choice, and at least 12 other species are requesting defense treaties. It was exactly what human planners had hoped for. By demonstrating both technological superiority and moral restraint, humanity was positioning itself as a protector rather than a conqueror. "Sir," Steve Clark reported, "I'm detecting multiple hyperspace disturbances throughout the sector. It looks like everyone with a starship is moving to secure their positions." Admiral Mitchell nodded. "The galaxy is reorganizing itself around the new reality. Species that have been oppressed for centuries are finally seeing hope for change. Those that have profited from the old system are scrambling to maintain their advantages." Captain Vel Nara, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "Admiral Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Valdari people, I want to express our gratitude, but I also want to ask, what comes next? How will humanity use this power?" It was the question everyone was thinking, but afraid to ask. Mitchell looked directly at the Valdari captain. "Captain Vel Nara, humanity has no interest in conquest or empire building. Our goal is simple: to ensure that what happened to your people today never happens again. We want a galaxy where civilian populations can live without fear of attack, where weaker species aren't preyed upon by stronger ones, and where conflicts are resolved through diplomacy rather than violence. And if others refuse to accept this vision?" Ambassador Relthas asked quietly. Jake answered for his admiral. "Then they'll discover what happened to the Krex fleet was just the beginning." The weight of that statement settled over everyone listening. The galaxy's bullies and aggressors had just been put on notice that their days of unopposed violence were over. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his weapons station. "Admiral Captain, all human vessels are reporting full readiness. We're prepared for whatever comes next." Admiral Mitchell smiled with satisfaction. "Excellent. Captain Morrison, you and your crew have done outstanding work here. The USS Defender will remain on station to ensure the Valdari colonists reach their destination safely. The rest of the fleet will begin deploying to our new patrol zones." As the human vessels began to move into their assigned positions, the other fleets in the system watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The galaxy had just witnessed the emergence of a new superpower, one with technology that seemed almost magical and a moral code that demanded protection of the innocent. Jake stood on his bridge, watching as the various alien fleets began to withdraw. Some left reluctantly, clearly planning to report back to their governments about the need for new strategies. Others departed with obvious relief, grateful that someone was finally willing to challenge the galaxy's predators. "Captain," Amy said softly, "we're receiving thank you messages from dozens of species. Small ones, mostly, colonies and settlements that have been living in fear of attacks like the one we stopped today." Jake nodded. It was what made everything worthwhile. For too long, the galaxy had operated on the principle that might makes right. Now there was an alternative. The USS Defender and her sister ships represented more than just advanced technology. They represented hope for a better future, one where strength was used to protect rather than oppress. As Jake watched the last of the alien fleets disappear into hyperspace, he knew that humanity's quiet period was over. They were now major players on the galactic stage, with all the responsibilities that entailed. But they were ready. They had been preparing for this moment for decades, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish when they set their minds to it. The age of human expansion hadn't just begun. It was about to reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, morality, and the future of civilization itself. The silence that had frozen the galaxy when humanity's warship arrived was finally broken, and the sound that replaced it was the beginning of a new era.